Well, welcome to a very special edition of Carnivore Radio. Dr. Lopkin, I'll hand it off to you. Why is this so special? And put it in the context of other podcasts.
Yes, this is our 300th podcast. And I was informed by
Yippee.
several people over the course of the last few weeks that apparently the bulk of podcasters don't even get past 100. They were actually looking for podcasters that did this, and we are now at 300. And that's 300 episodes on top of our years on terrestrial radio.
Which we were duly evicted of, correct?
Yes, we were.
Because we were part of a liberal, a bastion of liberal free thinking, weren't we?
Yes.
Except for us.
Yes, the station that we were on did not want to hear facts and truth. They were more interested in pushing the liberal agenda. So they decided that we did not have any place on their station, which, quite frankly, was a remarkable move on their part because we were the highest rated show on the station.
Far and away, not even close.
As a call-in show, we got more callers than most of their primetime lineup combined.
Any of them. Yes. And yes. They love to hear free speech. And even when I was helping them with their fund drive, manning the phones, their audience, the free thinkers in their audiences, meaning their mainstay people, as soon as I picked up the phone, they said, "Oh, you're that guy from Carnivore Radio," and they just hang up. Yeah, very tolerant. You want to hear the other side.
So tolerant. And, I think it's very important that we are still here. And actually, from what I understand, this was a public radio station, and fundraising has actually dropped since they got rid of us.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're not, we're tooting our own, but it was real. We had a great show. Chris Calandra, Marty Keene. It was a great show. We had callers like driving through the state saying, "Wow, you guys are awesome." And we had a station manager that would rather promote Lesbian Hour than a show that was actually rocking and rolling. But that's another issue, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin? A marketing genius.
Yes, but the important thing is we are still here after all of these years. Still standing and still fighting for freedom of speech, which now seems to be even more important than ever, as other countries are now trying to crack down on the U.S.'s freedom of speech.
Yes, in Europe in particular, Elon Musk got a lot of pushback. But you know what I like about Elon Musk? He has FU money. He gave it right back.
Yes, he does.
You know what?
Yes, both.
Yeah.
Yes, the European Union sent a letter to Elon Musk and the CEO of X saying that they had to monitor what was being said on their platform and what Donald Trump was going to say in their live interview. Otherwise, they would be forced to use their abilities to fine and possibly shut off X in Europe because the European Union does not allow this kind of speech. And both the CEO and Elon Musk essentially told them to go F themselves, to the point that the commission that the person was representing writing this letter to them actually backtracked and said he had gone rogue. They did not endorse this letter and completely did a 180 saying, "No, you guys have freedom of speech. This had nothing to do with us. He had no right to write that letter."
Yeah, very interesting. But it's kind of well, it's kind of, it's very scary and dangerous. England, there's actual, you could go to jail. I mean, this is where America's headed. And England is essentially close to a civil war, not a shooting civil war, but a that much
Well,
basically. Go ahead.
I'm not willing to go that far. Given the violence they've been seeing in the streets, they may end up with an actual civil war if they can't get this under control. And unfortunately, it's extremists on both sides that are stoking the flames.
Yes, it is, but it's also, I believe, a reaction to globalism and liberalism. Uh, Unchecked immigration. I mean, essentially ruining the very fabric of English society and economy. And I think
Yes.
that's the agenda of all globalist elite liberals. And if they had their way, God forbid, they've already proven it in America. That's essentially what they would have. There's no
Well,
such thing as American culture or English or European culture. No, that's something to be despised. That's racist.
yeah, right
And
now in
people,
England,
but
you can actually be arrested for questioning the motives and actions of the English government. And while they're doing that, Muslim immigrants who are trying to push Sharia law on the country are being protected for carrying deadly weapons and assaulting British citizens.
yeah, but it's more than fast. It's fascinating and disturbing the huge disconnect between the ruling liberal elites and regular society. It's true in America, obviously in England, Germany. It's just mind-boggling. Like the loathing, the utter disregard for what the average person wants, feels, or needs. It's stunning.
What's really scary is that all of this was completely predictable. And if you don't believe me on that, go watch the movie, or even better, read the original source material for V for Vendetta. This was written by a British author. I believe it was Alan Moore. And it is about a liberal slash fascist government that has taken over, and this one guy who is, identified as V starts a revolution. And if you watch the movie, or even better, again, read the books and or the comics that it was originally from, it is frightening how close to reality it has become.
Yeah, I remember. I'm gonna have to rewatch that movie. I thought it was excellent. I don't remember all the details, obviously, but it was a very good movie. And again, you put that under the current situation. I guess art imitates reality, or vice versa. It's downright scary. I mean, the thought police. I mean, and I'm sure. Fast forward 10 more years with liberal rule in America, it started at ESU, and I'm just kidding. But no, I'm sure they would, there'd be laws. They're pushing for that now, to curtail free speech, because it threatens them. They were, remember the, well, you don't remember the 60s, but going back, looking at historical footage, they were the ones. The liberals were the ones of teach-ins and knowledge-ins and all that crap. And now it's completely flipped, hasn't it?
It really has. And the fact of the matter is, the only way for a civilization to move forward is to promote the free exchange of ideas. Because whether you like the ideas or not, if they see the light of day, if they are exposed to healthy debate, then only the best ideas survive. It is those people that know they're doing wrong that don't want to expose their ideas to criticism.
Yes, and maybe it's indicative of the fact that they know their ideas cannot really see the light of day, just like their current presidential candidate. But we'll talk about that in a second. But it is, again, disturbing, because you look at the corporate media, they basically were in on the coup. Let's cut the crap and get right to the truth. They turned on Biden because they were allowed to, and then he was replaced with Camilla in a coup attempt, soft coup, but still a coup attempt. And now they're giving puff pieces, essentially being the marketing arm of her campaign. She hasn't done an interview in almost a month. She reads not just a teleprompter, but the same speech like a third grader could. And they're involved in the messaging of her campaign, aren't they? Including Time Magazine, which I didn't even know was even around anymore when they put her on the cover, even not a picture because they couldn't get a picture of her. And usually when you have a piece, I don't know, someone, Fred Smith, the CEO of the year or whatever, and he or she would have an article or an interview in the magazine. She didn't even do an interview with Time, which would be about the puffiest piece you could ever imagine.
Yeah, this was absolutely ridiculous. The idea that Time is giving the cover to an article that has no comments from the campaign, no comments from the candidate. She wouldn't even sit down for a photo shoot. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. So they have no facts. They're talking about opinion, and they gave that the cover. Time used to be a news magazine. I guess those days are over.
No, and talk about relevancy, zero. I don't know anyone. I think the average age, you talk about marketing, demographically, I'm serious, would be over 60. I would put everything on that.
Well, I mean
who reads Time Magazine?
That's
like
a
case. Grandmother or something.
I mean, that's the case for most magazines now. I mean, certainly print versions. If you go to the supermarket, there used to be whole aisles of magazines. When you went to the checkout, there were tons of them. Now what's there? It's, the Weekly Globe, reporting on UFOs. That's basically all that's left there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And to that point, what you're left is, you're right. The Inquirer plus basically just entertainment, like 3 or 4. I don't know what they are. Vogue or whatever. So there's no news magazines. There used to be Time, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report. Knock yourself out, Time, because I don't even know who reads you. So that was good. And then any credibility you had at all is goodbye. But speaking of credibility, we talked about the corporate media.
This did a lot to kill Time's credibility. It was a shame.
It's over. It's embarrassingly over. But the CNN host, name escapes me, was on Colbert. I don't know how anyone could be on that show. And he basically, he actually, I think, believed it. He says, well, CNN, I know you just report the news objectively. And the audience thought it was a joke. It was hysterical. And we talked about this before, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I saw a recent update about their ratings. It's like they're committing suicide. I saw a really good documentary about how they're actually, what they had and where they are now, that it's almost irreversible. And their ratings are like, whoa. In fact, they got beaten by Newsmax in prime time.
Actually, though, CNN is starting to turn things around. For the 48-hour news cycle following Joe Biden pulling out of the election, CNN, who was covering the story straight without any bias, actually beat every news outlet except Fox News. They beat MSNBC, they beat NBC, they beat CBS and ABC. So they are starting to turn it around. And the key is to go back to actually reporting news.
What I heard, and again, you correct me if I'm wrong, but what the information I had was that they had the bump that you talked about because they were so-called objective. and now it's starting to crash again. But hey, not a big issue for me, and I hope they do get their act together because I miss the old CNN. But speaking of nostalgia, we have with Kamala Basement 2.0, don't we? No interviews, no public speaking, no nothing, reading exactly the same speech over and over again. I don't know why anyone would show up to a rally, but that's not my business.
Well, I'll tell you.
Dr. Eric Lopkin.
Hang on, because I can tell you exactly why they're showing up to her rallies. It has been leaked to the press by folks that have been there that one, Kamala, unlike a Trump rally, has an opening act, usually a DJ or a pop singer, and that's what they're going to see. In fact, if you take a look at some of the footage, you can actually see when the opening act is over and Kamala starts talking, people are leaving the rally. Furthermore, they're actually paying people to come to the rallies. Yes. This was a leak from the Democratic State Committee of Georgia, who admitted that they were paying people to go to the Harris rallies.
Okay, but the quintessential question is, Dr. Eric Lopkin, Basement 2.0, is it working? I don't know. I want your opinion because the polls seem to be suggesting that it is working. Your thoughts?
The polls,
is it sustainable also? That's another question. Go ahead.
The polls do seem to indicate that the basement strategy is working. Leaks out of her own campaign have said this is what they want to do because they are terrified of her talking without a teleprompter. But actually, Dana Perino on Fox News brought up an important point. If you take a look at every one of Kamala's campaigns, the 2020 presidential election, her previous campaigns in California, she always starts out very strong. And then the more she talks, the worse she does. So I think the campaign honestly believes the only hope they have of getting her into the White House is a basement campaign and keep her from talking to anybody.
Yeah, I would obviously agree with that. I think, in my humble opinion, and I want your opinion on this, I'm not so sure it's going to work because in 2020, Biden had the cover of COVID. Yes, it was trumped up, no pun intended, but he had that cover. She has no cover. She does have the advantage of only has to endure this for 2 more months, but I don't see it working. I don't see it working. And what's going to happen? Another question is what's going to happen when she debates? I mean, her issues are she's flipped on every issue. Is that going to fly?
I don't think it's going to work. Even with the exception of the very liberal media like MSNBC, most media outlets are already criticizing her for not taking questions. Certainly the Washington Post has gone after her. The New York Times has gone after her. I think NBC.
Oh, even CNN has.
Right. CNN has gone after her. So the media is not going to put up with 2 more months of her not saying anything. As for the debate, she has a major flaw because all Trump has to do for a rebuttal, anytime she says this is what she is going to do, Trump's rebuttal needs to be, so why haven't you done it yet? Biden is obviously
I 100% agree. There's 2 issues with that, though. Can Trump keep his shit together? Number 1. And number 2, you have ABC. That's pretty far left. Stephanopoulos, I mean, he has a major impact on that so-called news operation. It's about questioning, too. If they grill him on January 6th and abortion and talk to her about global warming, he may not have that opportunity. Your thoughts?
Well, he always has an opportunity to rebut what she says. That's part of the debate rules. So they can't stop him from doing that, even if they try to steer him. ABC, though, is actually caught between a rock and a hard place, and they need to be on their best behavior because there is actually a lawsuit right now between the Trump campaign and Donald Trump and ABC. So there is, and Donald Trump had said he is concerned about a conflict of interest with this debate. So they can, if they go harder on Trump than they do on Harris, they're going to have to explain that in court because Trump is then going to have that as evidence of what they've been doing. So they stand to lose financially millions if they don't toe the line and play this above board.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree that. I also think that there is some degree of wanting to be somewhat credible. And there, again, Harris and Trump are going to be showcased, but so is the news organization. And if it's blatantly obvious that they're one-sided, CNN they did a good debate, and I think all eyes were upon them too. And I think it's a similar situation.
All eyes were on CNN, and CNN did a fantastic job.
Fantastic job, yes.
They were fair to both candidates, and people were questioning if that was going to happen before the debate, which actually puts more pressure on ABC because now they're going to be compared to the job that CNN did.
100% agree. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, I think we do agree that I think it's a uber sugar high. It's not just like the State of the Union with numbnuts, but I don't think it's sustainable if there's not some degree of credibility because of her youth, and there is no COVID. It just doesn't fly. Well, and you can only create so much fluff. I mean, even a ill-informed or low-ed voter is going to say, "Okay, what's going on here?"
Yeah,
it's not sustainable.
There is no COVID for her to hide behind, but at some point, people are going to realize if you go to the Harris campaign website, to this day, there are no policies on there. She has said no, the only policy position she has put out is that she is now backing Trump's idea about no tax on tips. That is the only policy she's put forward. She is supposed to put forward an economic policy later this week, but according to people in her campaign, they are trying to craft a policy that at the same time makes her an individual and not just an arm of the Biden administration without pulling away from Biden's economic policies. Well, if she's going to double down on Biden's economic policies, we had inflation numbers today that, the top line number looks great. It was 0.2% since last month, which is, inflation is rising slower. But if you dig down into these numbers,
groceries, things like that.
Groceries, rent, and fuel and energy, which are not counted in that top line number, were up almost 9% year over year. The prices on those items since the time Biden took office is up 25%. The average family of four now has to pay almost $20,000 a year more than they did under the Trump administration to get the same things.
Okay, so another all well done, points well taken. But isn't there a bigger issue? How the hell are those things not in the inflation report? And by the way, it changed under Obama. Surprise, surprise. You have things like how many houses do you buy in a friggin' life? How is fuel not part of that? That's insane.
Well, you just answered.
Groceries.
You just answered your own question. The number was changed by the Obama administration because they wanted the economy to look stronger than it was. And, Trump really should have put them back. But to be honest, I don't think any president is going to do that, because the minute they do, their economy looks worse than the previous administration, and nobody wants that. So we're
Yes, and
stuck with
Obama
these.
knew it. Yes.
Right. So now we're stuck with these faulty numbers, and
Okay, but
people.
doesn't it go to a fair press? If they were doing their effing job, wouldn't they say the official inflation number is 0.2%? However, the real number is blah blah blah. Hello, if it was Trump, they would do that. Of course, they would.
They would. And
100%.
they still do that in certain places. Correspondents for Fox Business have been doing that. Correspondents for CNBC have been doing that. Correspondents on Bloomberg television have been doing that. What's the common denominator? You're talking about reporters with expertise in business. The general press no longer has that understanding. They're being hired because they worked at a White House, because they have political contacts. They're not trained journalists anymore. They don't know how to do this. So
Agreed.
the only place you're getting that information, and you'll see the same thing with the unemployment numbers, because the same thing. The top line unemployment numbers are almost always wrong, and they're revised, 2 and 3 months down the road. Only these financial networks are covering those revisions.
Yes, very interesting. I don't know what I don't know if that really has a huge impact, meaning these fake numbers, because I think families still, like I drove by, gas is almost $4 a gallon. I mean, so numbers schmumbers, who cares? And the average person's not really dialed into this. They're dialed in, like you said, to their pocketbook or lack thereof, and their credit card debt, which the interest rates could choke a horse, literally.
Yeah, interest rates, of course, have been high because the Fed has been trying to stop inflation, which I love the fact that, the Fed has done everything they can to slow inflation. Biden has fought them tooth and nail, as has Harris, and yet the Biden Harris administration is trying to take credit for inflation slowing. But yeah, people are seeing their credit card bills are higher now because they've had to rely on them to survive. The interest on those credit cards are higher. And
you can never pay it off, by the way.
Most
those kinds of interest rates, forget
most
about it.
people that I talk to, and I know I go through this every time I walk out of a supermarket, I am disgusted by how much I am paying for the same things I was buying 4 years ago. It is ridiculous. And that is what people see. They buy groceries every week. They buy gasoline every week. They pay their electric bills every month. All of these have gone up more than this inflation rate. And that's what they're seeing.
In Connecticut, Eversource is out of control. Energy bills.
The energy bills in Connecticut and several other states, particularly deep blue states, have gone out of control because the states have added fees. There is a fee that the state of Connecticut added that is between 20 and 30% of your total bill. And the purpose of this fee is so the energy companies can recoup losses from people that didn't pay their bills during COVID.
Isn't that called communism?
Basically, yes. Yes, it is.
There you go. Well, yeah, and they, of course, they put that under the radar, I'm sure. So, yeah, I think the numbers, I think it's kind of, meaningless. And I think if Harris talks about the good numbers, only she could be so dumb, it'll blow up because people don't want to hear it. And on other issues related to the campaign, what her only real decision, I'm not sure, I think Pelosi was responsible for as well. What a VP choice. I mean, basically is in the reserve when they're about to be deployed, cuts and runs, and still claims that he had a rifle in combat. if it was a Republican, it would be, what do you call it? Game over, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes,
Game over.
his military record is disgusting. His own commanding officer released a letter to the press saying that he never completed the certification for sergeant major, so he doesn't get to call himself that. He quit the reserves and went outside of the chain of command to figure out a way to do that before being deployed overseas. And not only did he leave his troops in a lurch, none of them were sorry to see him go.
No, he was a horrible, well, not even close to being a leader. He's a freak. His family's a freak. His wife said that she basically left the windows open during the Floyd riot so she could smell the burning tires. He let Minneapolis burn, but there's crickets in the media. This guy is not qualified to work at Jiffy Lube. How do you like that?
No, he's not.
A complete idiot.
He had, during COVID, some of the most severe lockdown rules of any state, including throwing business owners in jail that didn't comply.
And basically also a 1984 kind of a thing about snitch, like Big Brother, snitch on your neighbor.
Yes, he had a hotline for people to snitch on their neighbors if they were not staying 6 feet away. And at least to me, more importantly, is when he threw these business people in jail, they did not have a trial. They did not have representation. This was completely illegal. This is who we want in the VP seat? This isn't somebody
again, J.D. Vance has some issues, but in a debate, I think it could be an electrocution. I mean, this guy, come on.
The VP debate is going to be must-see television because Waltz's own people have said he can't debate. He's not up to it. He's not smart enough. I can't wait to see that.
Okay, wait, before you go on, what impact does that have? I think it does have an impact, but I want to listen to you first.
I think it'll have some impact, not as much as Kamala's debate is going to have, obviously. But you're starting to see, like, even the people in Minnesota are turning against him. So he's not going to bring much to the ticket. I don't know if it's going to turn people off. I don't know that the vice presidential choice really affects that many people. I know in my own voting history, the only VP for in the presidential race that I ever gave a damn about was Joe Lieberman. So I think
that helped, by the way.
Well, Joe Lieberman did help the ticket, but yeah, I don't know that Waltz is going to have that big an impact, but I think the little impact he is going to have is going to be negative.
I think it will have an impact. It's not going to be a huge, major. I think it'll be like a 1-point impact. And the reason for that is because he's so radical, so out of control, so incompetent. It goes to her decision-making and also sheds light on her overall political views, which she cannot escape. She appointed him. She supposedly agrees with what he's saying. So, again, it's not going to be good. But she is doing some things. Maybe you can comment on this with Google Media and basically suggesting that these press releases are actual news events. Isn't that true?
Well, not even press releases. The Harris campaign has been taking out Google ads that you can see at the top of Google search results. And they are formatting these ads to make them look like they are news articles touting Kamala's accomplishments, stating that these media outlets are in her corner. And they're actually using the media logos to fraudulently claim that this information came from those outlets. And Axios, the Associated Press, a couple of others, they've actually approached Google saying, we want this stopped. This is fraud. Why they're not going right to the campaign and saying, you better stop it, is beyond me. But yes, they are literally posting fake news to try to convince people.
You don't hear a lot about that in corporate media, but quite interesting. Obviously, if Trump did it, there'd be obviously hell to pay. But also on the topic of hell to pay, two hell to pay issues. The EV mandate, when you have people, and the Biden administration does have, at least in my opinion, the honor of having the most incompetent, woke, lunacy administration ever, the head of the Department of Transportation and Energy, but they're both involved in the EV mandate. I pity anyone in our audience that was foolish enough to buy an EV and basically consume the hype, because it's a literal financial disaster for the car companies, but more importantly, the average person who's not just a woke millionaire trying to make a social justice warrior statement. Because if you buy an EV, let's say a $55,000 EV, the day it leaves the lot, it doesn't just, it vertically depreciates. And dealers don't even want them back.
Well, it's more than even that. We talked several weeks ago about the increasing costs of car ownership, but we were talking about traditional cars. But that cost of ownership for an EV is much higher. And now they're seeing repairing an EV costs a lot more than repairing a traditional car. The cost, we just talked about the cost of energy. Plugging in these cars costs a fortune now because energy rates keep going up. The cost of ownership on these is tremendous. And what does it say about the EV mandate? That the single individual most likely to benefit from a forced EV mandate, Elon Musk, is fighting the mandate.
It's mind-boggling, but what it really is also is you have anytime government gets involved in business, it's a disaster, and especially this administration, because none of them have any practical experience whatsoever. Plus, we don't know if this technology is the one that's going to be the one that's going to take over from the combustion engine. Toyota, for instance, is looking at hydrogen cells. I mean, just rushing to EV, knee-jerk reaction because of the Green New Deal, and AOC with her great intellect is beyond foolhardiness. It's ridiculous, and I'm sorry for the people that fell into it.
It is ridiculous. For them. It is ridiculous for the government to say this is the technology we're using and we are going to force you to use it. Personally, from my own research, I think the hydrogen fuel cells are going to be ultimately what fuels the future, not battery-powered cars. But this is a symptom of government overspending and overregulation.
And having no qualifications to do that.
Right. Well, it's not just the Green New Deal. Figures came out just a few days ago that the Inflation Reduction Act that was supposed to build all of this infrastructure, apparently from the $1 trillion that was allocated, and a lot of that still hasn't been spent, $86 billion in projects have been canceled or paused indefinitely because they were not economically feasible. Why? Because of the Biden administration's inflation.
Totally unbelievable. And I think another consequence of Biden's administration, and thank God it's true, is the ending of Tootie Patootie Mayor Pete. He's finished. Even on a liberal show, they asked him, well, how many charging units has the administration managed to put in? 5. And the toast actually laughed. You couldn't help it.
Yeah,
5.
they spent billions of dollars from that infrastructure bill to install 5 EV charging stations. I mean, this
Mayor Pete, is he finished or what?
I think if Harris loses, that's the end of every member of the Biden administration. If Harris manages to win, she may be able to save a couple of careers, but not many.
Not many. But speaking of the Biden administration, it's becoming increasingly, there's cause for concern. Obviously, it was blown out 4 years ago, but now it's getting to an alarming situation. I mean, it's concerning to say the least. I mean, Israel, the Middle East is on fire. Ukraine just went into Russia, and this guy basically is out to lunch.
Yeah,
and I've heard things that he's basically abdicated responsibility for things like, defense to the Defense Department. He's basically gone, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, well, I was about to say there's no one at the helm now, but to be fair, I don't believe there was anybody at the helm for the last 4 years. I don't think he was ever actually in charge. Now, though, you're seeing it. You saw him laying on the beach in Delaware. You see him wandering around. There, yesterday he had a big event, the first one he's had since leaving the campaign, where he was kicking off their cancer moonshot project, where they're giving
a cure cancer, I believe. Yes.
Yes, the goal is to cure cancer, and it's a great goal. It's a great goal, but I mean, this is not something the government is capable of doing. All they're doing is throwing money around. But they went to Tulane University, and there were two researchers from Tulane who were talking, and standing next to them, Biden was standing there with a look on his face that said he didn't know where he was. He didn't know what he was doing there. He was just zoned out.
Oh, no, absolutely. Plus, not only did he look like a zombie, but he sounded like someone that's from an insane asylum. Like half of what he said, you couldn't even make out. It's a very disturbing time. I mean, the world's on fire, and I really get pissed. I'm sorry, I'm pissed. It's not just positioning for the podcast. Where were all these people that are now coming out of the woodwork to say, yeah, he was blown out 3 years ago? You put it, I blame the Democratic apparatchik as well as the corporate media for literally, forget about politics. You put America, and you're continuing to put America and the world in peril by having a guy that shouldn't even be working. Like I heard a comedian say, if you were at a drive-up window at McDonald's and Uncle Joe was handing out the Happy Meals, you'd pull over as soon as you left the drive-through and make sure you got the double cheeseburger, the fries, and the milkshake, in the right order, so to speak. So this guy who couldn't work at a drive-up window is running the free world with a nuclear code. If that's not chilling, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say.
It is chilling, but it also calls into question the credibility of our whole leadership structure. Case in point, the other day, Waltz has been attacked for being a radical leftist. And Nancy Pelosi said, no, I worked with Waltz. He's a centrist. But this is the same person that said Joe Biden was completely capable of being president.
And by the way, she's not exactly all
right,
there.
And then forced him out.
Come on, that dog's already hunted. I mean, my God, she's blown out too. She can't put together a coherent sense. I mean, we have a ship of fools running this place. It's just really unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I am
It's chilling.
politically, I am actually at the point where I want to see every incumbent defeated. I don't care what party they're from. I want a clean sweep in the state legislature, in Washington. I want everybody out and bring in new people.
Oh no, no, because we've said this before, even going back to our terrestrial days. Like Casey Stengel said about the 1962 New York Mets
Yep.
when they lost, I don't know, 140 games. How'd you do it? Well, it was a team effort. You, no other country has gone from 1950 on top of the world to where we are. You have to try to F it up. And that's just a fact. And that's both parties.
Yes.
$35 trillion in debt. Powell, the Fed chief, says we can never pay that back. Duh, really, genius? We are so educational, everything, every measure of a country's success. Victor Hansen, David Hansen, said that he was talking about this chilling, that in the Great Depression, 1933, they built the Empire State Building in like 2 years. No computers, nothing. It took like 15 years to build the Freedom Tower. And he says that bridge in Baltimore, it may never get built. It's not going to be 2 years. It's not going to be whatever they said, $1 billion. It'll be 30 billion, and it's going to be 10 years away. I mean, we have lost our way as a country, and that's just a fact. It is true.
Actually, I'm going to push back because I want to make this a little more specific. We haven't lost our way as a country. I've been talking recently with a number of folks who grew up in Europe and have moved here. And there is a major difference in the mindset of an American citizen to that of a European citizen. And that is the fact that Americans believe we are capable of anything. We can fix this. We can do this better. Unfortunately, we now have what can only be called the political class. And these are folks who are literally passing seats down from generation to generation of politicians who have never worked for a living, who are not possessed of this American mindset. Yeah, they're not the best and the brightest. And that's the big problem. We need to dismantle the political class and bring
and that's
more
why
people
Trump's
in.
a threat, by the way.
That is exactly why Trump is a threat.
As imperfect as he is, which he's highly imperfect, but he's our last best hope, and that's just the truth. That's not being melodramatic. If Kamala gets in, Mamala, we are, you know what? We are screwed, dude.
It is why Donald Trump
run.
It's why Donald Trump is a threat. It's why Elon Musk is a threat, because these are people that actually achieved and then they got involved in politics. You know, again, I think it was Dana Perino on Fox News. Excuse me. It was Judge Jeanine Pirro who pointed out yesterday, you know, Trump is criticized because he praised Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un and Chairman Xi. But she pointed out he never praised them. He simply acknowledged that they accomplished their goals. And that's what's important.
Hold on. I actually think that when liberals say this, both in the media and in politics, again, it just proves they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Because, yes, you want to. Reagan had dialogue with enemies of the United States during the Cold War. And look what happened. We had an era of peace and the end of the Cold War for a period of time. You always talk to your adversaries. All these liberals, you know, that don't have the ho-hos like our VP nominee there to do anything, is always blood and guts when it comes to, you know, foreign entanglements and this and that. I hate geniuses. You ever hear of nuclear war, you moron?
Yeah, I mean, just take a look at history. During the 4 years of the Trump administration, we did not have a war in Ukraine. Russia did not invade anyone. North Korea did not invade anyone. They did not threaten anyone. Iran was held at bay. China was
Bankrupt.
held at bay. And as soon as you start appeasing, this is not new. This is the same thing that happened in Munich prior to World War II. The world leaders decided they wanted to appease Hitler. So
At
they
all
gave
costs,
into
yeah.
stuff, and we ended up in World War II.
Yes, and the other thing, dialogue does not equal appeasement. It's completely different. What you have here is idiots running the State Department and the Biden administration doing things like, forsaking our own oil and enriching Iran and getting beat up by, I mean, this is unbelievable that this is allowed to happen. That's the real issue. It's not talking. You can talk to people till the cows come home. That's not the issue. It's being weak and having no global strategy because you're too stupid to do that.
I don't think it's about being weak. I think it's the fact that these folks have literally over the years been brainwashed to see things through a specific filter. It's the filter of racism, the filter of climate change, the filter of, economic valleys. And by the way, history has shown, if you go back over the years, this fiscal divide that the left is so concerned about between the haves and the have-nots gets larger every time they try to put in a program to fix it.
Well, look at the Great Society, destroyed
Yes.
black culture and the black economy. There you go. Job well done. Thank God blacks are starting to get the message. You had an interesting story around your neighborhood, didn't you, Dr. Lobkin?
Yes, I live in a predominantly African American neighborhood in a deep blue state. And
as deep as it gets, yes.
Yeah. And just prior to the Biden Trump debate, I put a Trump sign out on our lawn, fully expecting to have blowback from some of my neighbors. There was no blowback. Nobody said anything to us about it until a few days ago when somebody who's known my wife for probably about 40 years or so came up to her and gave her a hug. Now, this is an African American male. Gave her a hug and said to her, "I've been meaning to talk to you. I was going to slip something into your mailbox. Thank you for putting up the Trump sign." And what he told us is that the entire community has been very quietly talking about how they have to vote for Trump because they cannot take 4 more years of these policies. These are folks, this is the African American community who are not talking to pollsters. They're not represented in the media. They're not talking to the media. They're barely talking above a whisper among themselves because they're afraid of being ostracized. But they are going to come out and vote for Trump. And this is a very similar thing that happened in 2016.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think I'm very encouraged by, and I couldn't be prouder of these people, African Americans, basically not going to be taken for granted and wanting to leave the reservation, which it is a reservation of poverty and other social issues. They're waking up. Hopefully, the Jewish community, I guess, is starting to. But let's get it together, guys. I mean, you have a Democratic Party that wouldn't run with someone that would have been a game changer. That's Shapiro of Pennsylvania, highly, very popular, I should say, like 70% approval. And they didn't put him in because he's Jewish. If that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what to tell you. I can't say anything more.
Well, the Jewish community in New York City is starting to wake up. the most recent poll, which was actually taken just before Waltz was named as the vice presidential candidate, New York City Jews are supporting Trump over Harris 50% to 49%. Now, that's not much, but Biden won that audience in 2020 by 20%. So you are seeing all of these areas that the Democrats have taken for granted are saying enough is enough. And, we keep talking about the polls, and there are a whole bunch of polls now that show Harris pulling ahead of Trump. I just want to remind everybody that at this point in 2016, all of the polls had Hillary Clinton winning in a landslide. So
yes, and getting back to 1988 with George H.W. Bush and his opponent, he was up like almost, I think it was 18% in this very time. So things can change dramatically.
Yeah, to be
and you're right about Hillary,
honest,
yes.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, the polls are an indicator, but they don't reflect reality. They reflect the same echo chamber that the media does. And we've talked about this for 15 years, going back to terrestrial radio. They have not changed their methodology. And I have spoken to several of the polling companies. They have not changed their methodologies since they got it so wrong in 2016. So you have to take every poll, whether it says Trump is ahead or Harris is ahead, with a grain of salt. This is going to be a close race. Why? Because it's always a close race. I was just watching or rewatching the show Mad Men, which was set in the 1960s, and they had a conversation in the show where they're talking about the Kennedy-Nixon election, and they're going, it should never have been this close. It should never have been this close. And the owner of the agency says it's always this close.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think if Trump had a more disciplined campaign, it shouldn't be this close, because if he just sticks to the issues, yes, of course it's not going to be a blowout, but there's no way Kamala Harris is ready for prime time. Again, if she gets in, you think Biden was bad? You're crazy.
Trump needs to focus on two things. He needs to focus on issues. And when people say, well, he hasn't said what he's going to do, he doesn't necessarily have to say what he's going to do, because we already saw what he was going to do, because he did it. So he needs to keep bringing that up. He needs to say, on this issue, this is what we did. We are going to continue that. Or if there's a new direction, he needs to say that. But his rebuttal to everything Kamala Harris says she is going to do on day one, or what she is going to do, he has to say, so why haven't you done it yet? Because we know Biden is not in control.
No, and also he needs to bring up, where were you? How come you didn't speak out when you said he was perfectly fine and you knew it? So I think that's a big, and I think also he has to talk about the flip-flopping, because how can she was against fracking, now she's for. It makes Kerry look like strident on the issues. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, again, she has not actually come out and given any position on any issue. So what the Trump campaign has been doing is they've been running commercials from her debates in 2019, from the statements on video that she made in 2020 when she was running for president the last time. That's the best thing he can do. Let her speak for herself. This is what she campaigned on.
and stop with the stupid name calling. I don't even know, cackler and all this crap. The shtick's over. Stop it. Be serious and stop, and don't play into your own weakness, which is being a doofus. Stick to the issues.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing, is that you can't underestimate Trump's ability to shoot himself in the foot.
No question about it. But people that haven't shot themselves in the foot is you and I in Carnivore Radio. 300th show, quite a momentous feat, and we won't tip any hats, but I think we have some big things in the future, don't we?
We do, and in fact, we want to hear from you. Go to the brand new Exvadio website. That's exvadio.com, exvadio.com/connect. Let us hear from you. Let us know what you're thinking. You can also go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. Message us there. Let us know your opinions. And of course, you can catch every episode at the Exvadio website, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
See you next week for 301.
We'll see you then.